She told me she was spending the weekend with her sister. I nodded, smiled even. But when she went to shower, I checked the hotel reservation under her name. 2 tickets, 1 room, and the second name wasn't her sister's. It was his. The man she swore she hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't confront her. I didn't break anything. I just sat there listening to the rain, because sometimes the loudest revenge starts with silence. Hello there, my friend. My name's Thomas, and I live out here in Wyoming, where the winters are long, the nights are quiet, and the truth has a way of finding you whether you're ready or not. I've seen many things in my lifetime, but nothing stings quite like betrayal from the one you built a home with. That's what I want to share with you tonight. So grab a cup of coffee, sit with me a while, and listen close. And before we begin, tell me in the comments, has anyone ever dismissed you because of your age, like your voice didn't matter anymore? I'd like to know. On the outside, we looked like a steady family. Elaine and I had been married more than 30 years. Folks around town called us the couple that never argued. She baked for the church on Sundays. I fixed the neighbors' fences when storms rolled through. We smiled in every photo, hand in hand, like nothing could touch us. Our son Daniel lives 3 hours away with his wife Michelle. Good man, busy with his own family, barely time for calls anymore. Our daughter Claire teaches in the city. She visits when she can, always bringing noise and stories to fill the quiet. From the outside, people thought we were blessed. 2 grown kids, a warm house, a quiet life. But inside that house, the silence was getting heavy. Elaine had changed in small ways first. A new perfume, a secretive phone smile, trips that didn't match her calendar. The kind of things you can't prove, but you feel. She'd brush off my questions with soft laughter, saying I worried too much. I started noticing her phone face down at dinner, her messages locked behind a password. Even our friends didn't see it. To them, we were still that loyal couple. To me, it was like living with a stranger wearing my wife's face. I told myself it was just distance, just age, just life slowing down. But deep down, I knew something was moving beneath the surface. And sooner or later, it was going to break through. When I was younger, I didn't have much. Just a pair of rough hands, an old pickup, and a heart full of promises. Elaine was there from the beginning, when I was working double shifts at the mill, when we couldn't afford heat some winters. She'd wrap her arms around me, say, "We'll build something real one day." And we did. I bought this plot of land on the edge of town, just dirt and wind back then. I built the house myself, piece by piece. Every nail, every board, every bit of it meant for her. When she walked through that front door the first time, tears rolled down her cheeks. She called it our forever home. That house became more than walls and wood. It was proof of everything I'd sacrificed. The years, the missed chances, the money I could have kept for myself. We raised our kids under that roof. Every birthday candle, every Christmas morning, all in that same kitchen, where she'd hum old love songs while I brewed coffee. The porch swing still creaks where we used to sit at sunset, her head resting on my shoulder. For decades, I thought that house meant safety. But now, I can't look at those walls without feeling the sting of what she turned it into. A stage for lies I never saw coming. When I found those hotel tickets, I thought about that house. I thought about how many nights I spent fixing broken things so she'd have comfort. I realized I had built more than a home. I had built a fortress for someone who had already decided to leave. That's the part that hurts the most. You can rebuild walls, but not the trust that used to hold them up. It started small, like it always does. One evening, I was fixing the back steps that had gotten loose after the last storm. Elaine stood by the doorway, phone in her hand, half listening while I talked about the garden fence I planned to repair next. She sighed, barely looking up, and said, "You don't have to fix everything, Thomas. Nobody's judging your little projects anymore." She said it like a joke, smiled as if it meant nothing. But it landed hard. 30 years of building, mending, working to make that house a home. Brushed aside with one careless sentence. I didn't answer. I just kept hammering, though the wood blurred through my eyes. Inside, something twisted. Not anger, just a slow ache. The kind that sinks deep and doesn't go away. She went back to her phone, laughing softly at something, and for the first time her laughter didn't sound like home. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling we'd painted together years ago. I remembered her words, every syllable, like they'd been carved into my chest. Nobody's judging your little projects anymore. It was small, sharp, and cruel in a way she'd probably never even notice. But I noticed. And that was the moment I started to see it. The distance, the contempt, the quiet way love turns into something else. I swallowed the pain, told myself it was nothing. But the truth is, a man doesn't forget words like that. They settle somewhere deep, waiting for the day when silence becomes his only answer. After that night, things changed. Not all at once, just piece by piece. It was the little things that started cutting deeper than any fight could. One evening at dinner, Elaine looked at her phone through the whole meal. I just told her Daniel was thinking of visiting next month. She didn't look up, just nodded and said, "That's nice, dear," her thumb still tapping. Another night, I found a new bottle of perfume on the dresser. Something expensive, something I hadn't bought. When I asked about it, she said, "Oh, it was on sale." But she wouldn't meet my eyes. Then came the talk about money. She started asking strange questions. How much the house might sell for, whether I'd updated the will. She laughed it off when I looked confused, saying, "You never know, Tom. We're not getting any younger." But her tone wasn't playful. It was careful. Like someone testing the water before stepping in. I noticed how often she left for errands now. Always the same excuse, groceries, her sister, or the church ladies' meeting. Yet she came home late, smelling like hotel soap and a man's cologne I didn't recognize. I never said a word. I just watched. Watched her build her lies brick by brick, thinking she was clever enough to hide behind them. There was one night I'll never forget. We were at the neighbor's barbecue, and she laughed too loud at another man's joke, a kind of laugh she hadn't shared with me in years. Someone nearby said, "You two still act like newlyweds." She smiled and said, "Oh, we just know how to keep things interesting." I smiled too, but inside I felt something cold. I started noticing everything. The way her phone never left her side, how she showered right after coming home, how she talked about freedom like it was a word she'd just discovered. Every moment was another piece falling into place, another quiet truth tightening its grip around my chest. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because sometimes letting someone walk deeper into their lie tells you more than any question ever could. It's strange how betrayal doesn't scream at first, it whispers. You start hearing things you were never meant to hear. One night, around midnight, I woke to the sound of her voice in the kitchen. Soft, hushed. I listened from the hallway. She was laughing, the kind of laugh people save for someone they're not supposed to be talking to. When she hung up, she tiptoed back into bed like a thief. I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. The next morning, her phone was gone from the counter, locked tight in her purse. She never used to care if it rang in front of me. Now she'd flip it over the second it buzzed. Then the money started disappearing. Small amounts at first, 200 here, 500 there. I checked the accounts. Transfers made to a card I didn't recognize. When I asked, she said it was for family things. I didn't press, but I took note. A week later, she mentioned something about updating our insurance papers, said the company needed my signature again. When I looked closer, the form wasn't from the same place. It was for a joint life policy, with her as the primary beneficiary. She smiled and said, "It's just for security, Thomas. I want to make sure we're both protected." That word, protected, stuck with me. She said it too easily, too smooth. I started to notice other things. Faint perfume in her car that didn't belong to her. Hotel receipts tucked behind old bills. The kind of details only careless people leave behind when they start thinking you're blind. One afternoon, she called me by the wrong name. It slipped out like air. Quick, quiet, gone in a heartbeat. I asked, "What did you say?" She froze, laughed, and brushed it off. But I saw the truth flash in her eyes before she looked away. By then, I wasn't guessing anymore. I was waiting for the lie to show its face. I could feel it coming, like thunder building behind a calm sky. I didn't know when, but I knew soon I'd see it in black and white. And when I did, I'd make sure she understood that silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it means you're just giving the truth enough rope to hang itself. It happened on a Friday morning. Elaine said she was going to spend the weekend with her sister. Her suitcase was already packed, neat and careful, sitting by the door before I'd even finished my coffee. She kissed my cheek, said, "Don't wait up, I'll call when I get there." Then she drove off. Same calm smile, same lies she'd rehearsed 100 times. Something in me wanted to believe her, just one more time. But something else, something older, quieter, told me not to. I walked back inside and saw the printer light blinking. One new document waiting. I clicked it. The paper slid out, warm to the touch. It was a hotel confirmation. 2 nights, 1 room, 2 tickets. Her name on one line, and beneath it, another. Mark Weller, the man she swore she hadn't spoken to since our daughter's wedding 15 years ago. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at that paper. I could have torn it up. I could have driven straight to that hotel and made a scene she'd never forget. But I didn't. I folded it neatly, slipped it into an envelope, and placed it in my desk drawer under the old property deeds. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to curse. I had what I needed. Proof that she'd buried our marriage under her own hands. Later that evening, I opened her closet to take out a sweater. The scent of cologne that wasn't mine hit me like smoke. Not strong, but enough to confirm everything the paper already told me. I closed the door, sat at the kitchen table, looked at the empty chair across from me, the one she used to fill with laughter, and I realized something I'd never said out loud. She wasn't the only one keeping a secret, because I'd been preparing too, quietly, patiently, for the day I'd finally stop protecting someone who stopped protecting me. Grandpa Thomas's calm, reflective storytelling voice. It keeps the tone intimate, as though he's turning to look right at the listener, pulling them into his emotional space before the next act begins. Let me ask you something, my friend. What would you have done if you found that paper? Would you have called her out right there, slammed it on the table, demanded the truth? Or would you have stayed silent, the way I did, and let the truth dig its own grave? I sat there that night thinking about it. The phone was right beside me. I could have called her, could have driven down to that hotel and caught her red-handed. But sometimes confronting a liar only gives them more time to build a better story. So I said nothing. I just watched, listened, and waited. Because silence has a way of showing people who they really are. Now tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? Would you have spoken, or let the quiet do the talking for you? She came back Sunday evening, smiling like nothing had happened. The car door slammed, heels clicked up the porch, suitcase in hand. She called out, "I'm home," and kissed my cheek like a woman who had nothing to hide. I smiled back, said dinner was almost ready. We sat across from each other at the table, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, everything just the way she liked it. I watched her talk, her hands moving as she told some story about her sister's trip. Every word was another brick in the wall she was still trying to build. Halfway through the meal she said, "You've been quiet lately, Thomas. Are you all right?" I nodded. "Just tired." She laughed, soft but sharp. "You should get out more. You've been acting so old lately." It wasn't what she said. It was the way she said it. Careless, cold, like she'd already decided I was beneath her now. She'd traded respect for pity, love for obligation. Then she said something that made my hands stop halfway to my plate. "You know, maybe it's time we think about selling this house. It's too much for us. We could start over somewhere new. Start over." The words echoed in my head. I looked around that table, the one I built, the walls I raised, the home I made from nothing, and I realized she wasn't talking about us. She was talking about herself. I looked her in the eye and said, "If you ever decide to leave, make sure you take everything that belongs to you." She blinked, confused, laughed it off. "Don't be dramatic," I smiled faintly. "No, Elaine, I mean it." And then I went back to eating, calm as ever. She didn't know that behind that quiet dinner table, her lies were already boxed up, waiting by the door. Because I wasn't the man she could manipulate anymore. I was the man who'd finally stopped protecting her from the truth. The next morning, the house was quiet, except for the coffee maker humming. Elaine came downstairs still in her robe, smiling like the night before had never happened. She asked, "What's your plan for today?" I said, "Just a bit of sorting, things that don't belong anymore." She laughed lightly, still not hearing the truth buried in that line. I took my coffee to the porch, opened the morning paper, and waited. I knew she'd go to her desk sooner or later, the same desk where I'd left the envelope. It didn't take long. I heard the sound of drawers opening, then silence. A long one, then the soft rustle of paper being unfolded. When she walked into the living room, her face was pale, her voice small. "Thomas, where did you get this?" I didn't look up from the paper. "You left it for me." She tried to speak again, fumbling for words that couldn't save her. "It's not what you think." I set my cup down, finally looked her in the eye and said, "Then what is it, Elaine? A mistake? A joke? A forgotten reservation under your name with a man who just happened to share your weekend?" She froze, mouth trembling. I could see the panic rising, not because she was sorry, but because she'd been caught. She reached for my arm, but I leaned back. "You don't have to explain," I said quietly. "You already did that when you packed your bag." For a second, she looked like she might cry. Then her expression hardened, the same defiance I'd seen creeping in for months. "You can't just throw away 30 years like this." I gave a small, tired smile. "You're right, I can't, but you already did." She stood there, hands shaking, no words left. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I just stood up, walked to the front door, and opened it. On the porch were all her boxes, stacked neatly, labeled with her name. Her eyes widened, and for the first time in a long while, she understood. The man she thought she could deceive had been watching quietly all along. She left that day without another word. Slammed the car door, tires screeching down the road. I didn't chase her. I didn't need to. Because everything she wanted to take from me was already gone. Her control, her secrets, her comfort. For a few days, the house was silent. I slept better than I had in months. The air felt lighter. I started cleaning, organizing, moving forward. I even fixed the old porch light that had been flickering for years. Strange, isn't it? How peace always shows up after the storm leaves. Then, 3 nights later, she came back. I saw the headlights through the curtains. She walked up the porch steps, eyes swollen, hair undone, clutching her purse like it could still hold her dignity. She tried her key. It didn't turn. She tried again. Nothing. She knocked, then pounded, shouting my name. "Thomas, please, let me in. We can talk about this." Her voice cracked, echoing through the night. I sat in my chair by the window, cup of tea in my hand, watching the same woman who once swore she'd never hurt me now begging for the door she'd chosen to close herself. After a while, her knocking stopped. I heard her sit on the steps. She started crying softly, whispering things I couldn't make out. Maybe apologies, maybe excuses. I didn't move. I didn't open the door. I just looked at the moonlight, hitting the boxes she'd left behind, and thought, this is what silence sounds like when it finally wins. The next morning, she was gone. Her car, her suitcase, everything. On the porch sat a single envelope. Inside was her wedding ring and a note that said, "You didn't have to do this." I smiled a little, because yes, I did. Sometimes the only way to end a lie is to let it choke on its own truth. That day, I changed the locks for the last time, and when I stood at the window, watching the sunrise spill over the house I built for her, I realized something. I hadn't lost her that weekend. I'd lost her long ago. All I did was finally stop pretending she was still mine. After she left, the house was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was peaceful. I made my coffee, sat on the porch, and realized I didn't miss her. I missed who she used to be. I learned something through all this. You don't need to fight every betrayal. Sometimes the calmest man in the room holds the most power. Because silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of someone who finally knows their worth. Thank you for staying with me, my friend. If you've ever been lied to, if someone you trusted made you feel small, remember this. You don't have to prove your worth to anyone who forgot it. Just step back, stay calm, and let truth do what it always does. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have opened that door or kept it closed like I did? I'd like to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay strong, stay wise, and stay blessed.